Devil May Cry 4 is one of my favorite games of all time. So when I found out Capcom will be releasing a special edition of the game, I was really excited to see what they would add after these 7 years. For those that don't know, Devil May Cry started up and popularized the character action genre way back in 2001. Character action games are known for their deep hack and slash combat and over-the-top flashy visuals. They also usually have a lot of replayability thanks to the scoring mechanics. A lot of fans even see the first playthrough of a character action game as just a tutorial for the real challenge that can be found in the higher difficulties. Although Bayonetta has surpassed DMC at this point, Devil May Cry 4 is still one of the best games available in the genre. The special edition comes with everything from the original release, plus a couple of new features. The console versions get Turbo Mode and Legendary Dark Knight Mode, which were on the original PC release. Turbo Mode increases the game speed by 20%, and as you can see, it does increase the speed enough to add some extra challenge. Legendary Dark Knight Mode adds significantly more enemies per encounter and works better than the other gimmick difficulties that are available in this game. All versions of the special edition get some minor visual changes such as motion blur, but they're not really noticeable, although I've heard that some hardcore players really dislike these new changes. There are 3 new playable characters, Virgil, Trish, and Lady. Virgil is playable on all the missions, whereas Lady is playable on the Nero missions and Trish is playable on all the Dante missions. A couple of new cutscenes were added featuring the new playable characters, which answer some story questions left behind in the original release. All the characters get alternate costumes, which is something that's been in all the Devil May Cry games, but it was absent from the original release of Devil May Cry 4. Finally, Sprint now activates immediately after running, as long as you're not in a fight. The story in DMC4 follows Nero, a new character in the series, but honestly, who really cares about the story? So let's move on to what really matters, the gameplay. The game features mostly linear level design that leads you from one combat section to another. There's some basic puzzles to solve in order to progress, but the puzzle solving is really just there for pacing because it provides some slower sections between the high-speed combat. The combat sections are where this game shines. The game's combat mechanics are best represented by its style meter. There are several ways to increase the style meter, but almost all of it will come from dealing damage to enemies. The meter gradually drops while you're not damaging the enemies, or if you repeat the same combos over and over. This forces you to vary up your moves and take down enemies in creative ways. The style meter also quickly drops if you take any damage, so there's more incentive to dodging enemy attacks rather than just trying to stay alive. However, it's not something you have to make use of since you can get through the game without making use of the style system. But the higher the style meter, the more red orbs and proud souls you'll get. Those can be spent at the shop to buy items as well as new moves for your characters. There's a nice amount of enemy variety, but they aren't really mixed together in interesting ways until the end of the game on a normal difficulty. The enemy mix-ups on the higher difficulties are much more interesting, especially whenever a blitz shows up in a group. The original release featured 2 playable characters, Nero and Dante. Playing through their levels is also where the story of the game is told. Nero is the main character of DMC4, and if it's your first time playing, you should start with Nero because he's the most accessible character. He only has 1 melee attack, which can be revved up, 1 gun, which can be charged for stronger shots, and his Devil Bringer. His Devil Bringer allows him to pull some enemies close, and if he can't pull the enemy, he will use it like a grappling hook and pull himself to the enemy. This makes it really easy for him to keep the style meter up because he doesn't really need to worry about spacing as much as the other characters. My favorite part about playing as Nero is being able to rev up his sword like a motorcycle. This lets you use stronger and flashier versions of his moves. The manual revving is too slow to use in the middle of battle, but there is a small window right after each sword strike which lets you rev up significantly faster. There's an even smaller window which revs up to the max, and learning how to use this ability is incredibly satisfying and one of the most rewarding parts of this game. My only issue with Nero is that he doesn't have multiple weapons, which means his moveset is somewhat limited compared to the other characters. Unlike Nero, Dante is pretty complicated. He has more stuff going on than any of the other characters in this game, with his 3 melee weapons, 3 different guns, and 5 different styles to use. All of those can be changed on the fly, so you can choose to stick with a specific combination or change it up depending on the situation. So this version of Dante is pretty much the Dante from Devil May Cry 3 without any limits. The Rebellion returns and is largely unchanged. The Gilgamesh Gauntlets are a better version of the Beowulf Gauntlets from DMC3, and each strike in the combo cannot be charged up. Dante's signature handguns and shotgun also return largely unchanged. Dante has 2 new weapons this time around. Lucifer is a weapon unlike anything I've ever seen. It doesn't do much damage with its normal attacks, but lets you set up for big damage by letting you detonate any thorns you leave behind anytime you want. The other new weapon, Pandora, has many different forms. Its main use is as a rocket launcher and a machine gun, but there are a couple other forms you can make use of depending on the situation. The best part about playing Dante is the style system. He has 5 different styles at his disposal. Trickster adds new mobility options, which allows Dante to get in position for other attacks. Swordmaster adds extra options for the equipped melee weapon. Gunslinger adds extra options for the equipped ranged weapon. Royal Guard is a defensive style which lets you absorb damage and turn it back against your enemies. He gets a 5th style which allows him to use the Yamato sword, but its moveset is pretty limited. The only bad thing I can say about Dante is that he has so much going on, and because of that, it's hard to find a comfortable controller setup because you have to do some weird finger movements to pull off some of these moves. I think the new Xbox Elite controller can fix that problem, but that's a pretty expensive solution. The Special Edition features 3 extra characters, but they don't have new missions. You simply play them on the same missions as Nero and Dante. Lady is incredibly different from all the other playable characters because all the other characters have melee as their primary form of damage with guns as support. Lady, on the other hand, uses her guns to dish out the damage and only has 1 weapon for melee, which is very slow and only useful in specific situations. In a lot of ways, Lady is a combination of Dante's gunslinger style along with some aspects of Nero and the Kalina Ann from Devil May Cry 3. She has 3 different guns, the fast handguns, a short-range sawed-off shotgun, and a rocket launcher, the Kalina Ann. She can also do melee attacks using the bayonet on the Kalina Ann. The most interesting thing about Lady is their ability to charge her guns. There are 3 levels of charge, and the higher levels do more damage but charge a lot slower. Her guns charge at different speeds, so you have to be careful because you can't use a normal attack while charging up. Lady can move and use special attacks while charging up her shotgun and handguns, but she has to stand still to charge the Kalina Ann and is super vulnerable to attacks. The problem with Lady is that a lot of her attack animations are taken from Dante, and seeing as how different the attack animations are for Nero, Dante, and Virgil, I wish Lady had gotten better treatment. I understand that the development team on the Special Edition was probably not given a lot of money to work with, but the reused animations are very noticeable and hard to ignore. Even with those problems, Lady is a lot of fun to play, and I would love to see what Capcom can do with her in the future if they ever decide to make another Devil May Cry game. Since Lady is all about the guns, Trish is all about the melee weapons. She has handguns and Pandora, but there's little variety in what you can do with guns as Trish. Like Nero, Trish can't cycle through weapons. Instead, her unarmed combos and her Sparta combos are available at all times. Her unarmed combos change if you use Round Trip with the Sparta sword, and the best one is being able to use her electric breakdance combo, which may or may not be a reference to Bayonetta. The best part about playing Trish is switching between her Round Trip moveset and her normal moveset. Setting up Round Trip on a big group of enemies and performing an electric breakdance and then recalling the Sparta to perform her golf finisher can be a blast. On the other hand, Trish has the same animation problems Lady has. Many of her attack animations come from Dante and Virgil, making some of her moves not as interesting. The other problem with Trish is that she has the least amount of variety in her moveset out of all the characters. She also lacks a unique mechanic that all the other characters have, which makes her even less interesting. In most other games, Trish would be an amazing character, but in Devil May Cry, she's just kinda boring. Finally, we have Virgil, and he is awesome, especially since he's the only character who can be played on all missions. It's pretty obvious that Virgil is where the majority of the development time went for the Special Edition. This Virgil is a combination of Virgil from Devil May Cry 3 and Virgil from DMC Devil May Cry. He has the same weapons he had in Devil May Cry 3, but each weapon has new combos. On top of that, many of his combos has a variant when used in Devil Trigger. The Yamato sword allows Virgil to increase the style meter easily, especially with one of his combo finishers. The Beowulf gauntlets have been given the same charge ability as the Gilgamesh gauntlets. The Force Edge and Yamato combo allows Virgil to attack quickly and dish out a lot of damage. Virgil doesn't like guns, so his ranged weapons are the summoned swords, which can be manipulated, offensively and defensively through the Devil Trigger gauge. The Dark Slayer style from Devil May Cry 3 and the Angel Summon Swords from DMC Devil May Cry are combined into the teleportation Virgil can use in DMC4. This teleportation can be used offensively by allowing Virgil to quickly close the distance between enemies, and defensively because Virgil is invulnerable to attacks while teleporting. This more than makes up for a lack of Devil Jump, since Virgil is the only character who doesn't have one. Virgil's unique trait is his concentration gauge, which increases quickly while Virgil walks near enemies and increases gradually while Virgil lands hits on enemies. It decreases if Virgil runs, misses hits, or takes damage. The higher the concentration gauge, the more damage Virgil does, and some of his moves also change, making some normal combos go on longer. This is a perfect fit for Virgil's personality because it gives you an incentive to remain calm in the middle of the fight, just like Virgil would. The only negative for Virgil is that he has a harder time with the Chimera enemies since he doesn't have a gun at his disposal to take care of them. Level design was the weakest part of Devil May Cry 4, and the special edition does nothing to make it better. It still feels like you're playing half a game sometimes, because after you get through about half of the missions, you have to backtrack through all the previous levels. They add some small puzzles to make it look different, but it's really obvious that it's padding out the length of the game. More than half of the bosses in the second half are also just repeats of old bosses. Playing through the forest levels the second time through is one of the most annoying parts of this game because there are a bunch of portals which block the normal route, and on the first playthrough it can be really frustrating because it's so easy to get lost. And they also repeat this pick a door puzzle that you had to do in the first half of the game. I'm okay with these types of puzzles only if they show up once in the game. In this game you have to do it twice, and it's one of the laziest puzzles because it's just a game of chance. Even I forget the solution from time to time, and I've played all the way through this game at least 30 times now. Finally, the worst offender of padding in this game are the fault enemies. These enemies are only there to increase your playtime because if they catch you, any progress in that room is taken away and you're forced into an extra fight. Then, to make it worse, any faults you kill return during the room reset. Being caught by one of these during the Mission 18 boss fight is a huge pacing issue. DMC4 would be better off without these guys. Most of these problems dwindle on repeat playthroughs as you get used to the game, which is good because replayability is one of the best parts about this game. The extra difficulties and the ranking system add a nice change on repeat playthroughs. The new content and the discounted price makes it a must-have for fans of Devil May Cry and character action games. If you played the original release but didn't really like it too much, the special edition won't change your mind. If you have never played a Devil May Cry game before, DMC4 Special Edition is a great start because it's really accessible and you don't need to know the story of the other Devil May Cry games. Plus, the over-the-top fights and the cutscenes are really fun to watch. In the end, this is still one of my favorite games of all time, and it shows how good character action games can be.